Wallabies rugby star Israel Folau says he will walk away from Australian rugby if he needs to after details emerged of his meeting with the union's CEO last week. Folau, one of the game's highest profile players, replied to an Instagram question asking what's God's plan for gay people with the answer hell unless they repent of their sins and turn to God. The reaction was immediate and high volume. Qantas, the named sponsor of the Qantas Wallabies, said their sponsorship may be reviewed if more such comments were made. Folau was summoned to HQ for a please explain, but it also seems a please pipe down. He didn't. He took to the internet with a column on the website Player's Voice saying Raylene Castle, CEO, had misrepresented his position and his comments, and that she did so to appease other people. Two New Zealand MPs, Louisa Wall, a former Black Fern and Silver Fern, and Marama Davidson said Folau's views put young gay people at risk, and we're going to hear later in the program from people worried about the impact of Folau's opinion. But first, a former Wallabies coach, Alan Jones, now a radio show host in Sydney.
Rugby Australia seems to think the only views that count are Qantas views. I mean, we're in desperate situations. I mean, there's a UN Declaration of Human Rights which indicates that people are entitled to express a view. That doesn't mean to say we agree with the view. I don't agree with the view. And just as you've got to handle the consequences of the views, well, Israel's quite prepared and he's handled those things with dignity. But he's just made it clear to Rugby Australia that if the views are unacceptable, he's happy to go. I find it quite extraordinary that many of these corporates believe they speak for the whole organisation. Don't tell me that Qantas, every person in Qantas agreed with same-sex marriage. They didn't. I don't know what Qantas and these outfits are doing getting involved in this. It's a privilege to be involved in the sponsorship of a national team, and they seem to say that, well, we're entitled to a view, but you're not. What kind of world are we in? I mean, this is taking us back to the age of Stalin. It's a terrible setup. I mean, you're entitled. There's too many people playing the victim card in all of this. I don't agree with what Israel has said. I'll tell you what, I've defended him to the hilt. He's entitled to his view, and he's entitled to have to live with the consequences of those views. Now, if Qantas then want to sponsor a team, but it's conditional on everybody in the team agreeing with their view, then I'll tell you what, I'd be telling Qantas to get packing. Look, Rugby Australia have gotten a clue. It's a dysfunctional outfit. They don't know what they're about. This Raylene Castle's been appointed. Her first big play is to call in Israel Folau. Well, and then the next big play was to race out and talk to the media. Then when she talked to the media, she didn't tell them what took place at the meeting. And Israel made it quite clear. He said, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that I won't be altering my views just to accommodate a sponsorship. And if that's uncomfortable for Rugby Australia, I'm prepared to go somewhere else. I mean, I think we need courageous young people like this to stand up to this politically correct nonsense that you've got to agree with what everybody else says. You can only say what other people allow you to say, and you're not allowed to have a different viewpoint, a controversial viewpoint, and every time you say something, someone's going to be wounded and injured. Look, it's time we all took a spoonful of cement and toughened up a bit. I mean, all sorts of things are said about all of us. Cop it. Get on with it. Stop playing the victim card. This stuff's gone too far, and here we've got a young footballer standing up to it. I don't know what it's got to do with rugby.
Standing up to what, Alan? Sorry, I'm really confused what he's standing up to. What he said was that gay people would go to hell. In what way is that standing up for anything?
He's entitled to a view. I mean, I don't agree with the view, and I've told him that. He's entitled to his view. What are we going to say? Israel?
So hold on a sec. So I'm really interested. So he's entitled to his view until when? If his view was that he supported Adolf Hitler, to take it to an absurd extreme, but if his view was that he was a Nazi sympathiser, he is he? So at what stage do we draw a line in the sand and say, actually, your view is injurious and damaging? Where do we draw that line?
On. Injurious and damaging to who? Most probably to himself. Come on, what world are we living in? If he wants to say the earth is flat, well, let him say the earth is flat. I mean, we've gone mad here, and people are intimidated from speaking out. And I'll give you a classic example of that.
Who's intimidated? Who's intimidated from speaking up? You're not intimidated from speaking up. The people you deal with aren't intimidated from speaking up. No one's intimidated. Is anyone intimidated from speaking up?
People are intimidated from speaking out. Now, at the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games, the news reports the following day were, what it was, wonderful spectacle. This was brilliant. This was the rest of it. Nothing about the Gold Coast, nothing about Queensland, nothing about Australia. It was a 2.5 hour history of Indigenous Australia. So I went on air and I said, well, I just thought it was appalling. I mean, it didn't represent Australia. 3% of Australians are Indigenous. There are 97% of others aren't. And it should have been representative of the Gold Coast and Australia. People are ringing me and saying, oh, thank God for you. I was terrified to say all that. That's exactly how I feel. And suddenly, 300,000 people on social media agreed with what I had said, but they weren't going to say it until I'd opened my mouth. We've reached the point where people are intimidated from speaking out. Now, if Israel wants to say these sorts of things and someone's injured, how the hell are they injured? I mean, people tell me every day to go to hell. And people say them. I'm sure people say terrible things about you.
They've said many terrible things. They've said many terrible things about me. But I'm a well-paid.
And you take a spoonful of cement.
But no one said I'm going to go to hell. I don't think anyone has said I'm going to go to hell because of my sexual orientation or because of choices I've made.
I don't.
Alan, I don't want to have. This is a fascinating conversation. But what you are talking from, the position you're talking from, is a kind of normative occupation of a whole lot of groups which don't get told they're going to hell. When was the last time someone looked at you and said, you're going to go to hell when you die?
How many times you mean? Come on. What? I mean, if they said it, toughen up, John. Hey, go and take a bit of cement and toughen up and stop playing this phony, injured person.
Alan, I'm as tough as an old boot, but I'm not a 17-year-old boy. I'm not a 17-year-old boy living in small-town Australia, surrounded by people who say homophobic things all the time, wondering if I dare to come out.
Well, hang on. I think there is a general perception out there in the community that we don't care about people's sexuality or gender, and they hear that all the time. There are people standing up for that all the time, for the equality of their viewpoint, whether it's the way in which we accommodate them in schools, whether it's the bullying in schools. All of these people know that though there is nothing wrong with your stating your sexuality, what you are, nothing. Now, someone has said something entirely different. Well, I say you're entitled to say that, let it go through the keeper, and you must live with the consequences of it, and he will live with the consequences of it. Just as if someone says the earth is flat. You think, well, this bloke's a bit of a lunatic, but we don't tie ourselves in a knot over the whole thing. I mean, God, there's far more important things for Rugby Australia to be talking about than this. They broke. They can't win a game against the New Zealand Promise. And here they're buying into an argument with a player, and the player must confirm. What's next? Are we going to have a view about, euthanasia? And if someone says, terrible thing to say, I think my mother should be allowed to die, give her a needle. Oh, you can't do that. We don't agree with mercy killing. What is it? Abortion. Okay, well, let's have a universal opinion about abortion and a universal opinion about euthanasia. And you'll all have to toe the line here, or else we don't want you in the team. This is rubbish and nonsense.
Alan Jones talking to us earlier, a couple of hours ago, out of Sydney.